episode of My Culture Story, we talk about the Kamba community. Enjoy. Naming in this community was done depending on the season, skin complexity, and the situation that the family was in during the birth of the child. Example, Wayua or Munyao meant famine. Mumbua or Kambua were born in a rainy season. Mudhina or Kadhini were born in an unpleasant situation. Mwilu or Kailu were dark-skinned. Mwikali or Mutindi were names given to a child if the mother labored for so long. To date, children can never be named after a person who is still alive. So those whose names replaced the dead were called Dunge, Katunge, or Mutunga. Initiation was conducted among the boys and girls at teenage. For girls, it was meant to manage sexual immorality at teenage. It was also a sign of transition from childhood to adulthood. It was believed that any girl who didn't go through the cut would not get suitors to ask her for her hand in marriage, and if she got a child outside wedlock, the child would die. In this community, younger siblings were never allowed to marry before their seniors. The boys' parents would look for a girl in the community who would be married by their son. They looked for a submissive, hardworking, and disciplined girl. After agreement, the dowry negotiation process would start. Families that practiced witchcraft were feared, and so their girls never got suitors. In the dowry payment, there were 3 compulsory goals that were given: a gallon of honey, gourds, brewed alcohol, and a blanket. This blanket was said to be a replacement for the ones the girl had used since childhood. Property such as livestock that were paid as dowry were later used to pay dowry for the bridegroom's brother. A goat was supposed to be returned to the man's home by his wife in case they divorced. This should be one of the 3 mandatory goats that were given as dowry. It showed that the marriage had been officially terminated, and therefore the two were allowed to start other relationships. This community also practiced polygamy, and so men were free to marry as many wives as possible, but only with the consent of the first wife. A man could marry another wife if, 1. If the woman couldn't bear male children, she would give permission to her husband to marry another wife. It was believed that male children pushed the growth of the generation. Also, if the first wife was barren, the husband could marry a younger woman to give him children. And lastly, men whose wives only gave birth to male children were seriously ridiculed by other men, since they had no daughters to help them pay dowry for the sons when they were ready to marry. So this was enough reason for a man to get another wife. It was a taboo for a Kamba woman to take alcohol because it was considered as a curse by the forefathers. When a person died, the body was preserved by pouring kerosene all over it. Most graves in this community were dug strategically in a cowshed to keep them off from the family's visibility. They also believed that the cow dung covered the grave quickly and completely. This was to protect them from witches who used to exhume bodies of the dead. To date, any woman who is married but whose dowry is not fully paid can never be buried in her husband's home compound unless it's paid during the mourning period. Something unique about this community is whenever a lady went out to fetch firewood or water or just far from home, the mother gave her a lasso. This lasso could scare away men and no one would dare tease them. So men respected this lasso, and anyone who dared force the girl to remove the shuka would pay a huge fine. This is my culture story.